Right. I think it's time I talked about leadership, or to be precise, about sustainable leadership. And I should have done it a while ago, really, but this was spurred now by the research that I've been carrying out for tonight's delivery. So, what my research brought it up was that CIPD reports that in the period covering from January 2022 to December 2023, the overall employee turnover in the UK across all industries was 34%. Naturally, it varies. Public administration being one of the lowest, something around 25%. Hospitality, somewhat not surprising, came in as the highest, which either 52 or 57%. I can't remember exactly now. And yes, that doesn't surprise us, isn't it? Because there's a quick buck for a lot of students and things like that. But the 34% overall is a pretty high number, especially when you consider that Oxford Economics actually estimates that it costs just over 30,000 to replace an employee whose position pays £25,000 per year. So a third of the staff on whatever is the size of the organization is a huge number, and it's a huge cost attached. Whilst my why lies not so much in the cost to the organizations, but more in the human and societal costs, which cannot and should not, I would argue, be expressed in monetary terms. But I think it's important that we speak about it because it is, in the end of the day, relevant to us all. There's also many sources, many sources, citing reasons for why people leave their jobs. And other than pay, which is quite obvious, some of the main reasons cited are poor management and leadership, toxic organizational culture, and lack of development opportunities. And this is particularly prevalent, yeah, that's a good enough word, prevalent among mid-level managers. So imagine a lot of mid-level managers, they find themselves in that position because they rose through the ranks. They know the business from the bottom up, and that's fair enough. And that's a good way, in my opinion, to fill the positions that come up within any given organization. But the problem lies when these people are given the promotion because they deserved it based on their knowledge and performance, and then they are left in the middle, in between people they ought to manage and lead and people who put the expectations upon their own heads. But they are not provided with the adequate training. And as a psychologist and as a leadership coach, I couldn't understand what's going on with these numbers. So all these thousands and thousands of leadership development programs across the world, and yet we have such huge numbers of staff turnover, citing the reasons, as mentioned before, as toxic organizational culture, lack of development, poor management and leadership. And in all fairness, I myself, some 12 years ago, had walked out from the job for these exact reasons. So it made me curious, and I did a lot of research, and I found that majority of these leadership development programs are actually not as deep as they could be. They are reasonably superficial. And I've been on a fair few myself, back in the day in my previous career, and so I am quite familiar with them. And now the research shows that they haven't changed much since I had been on them. So my experience of them, as well as my research, shows that what these leadership development programs do, they teach people on how to apply particular strategies in, say, well, any given situation, really. But the most important, of course, are those interpersonal skills. And we cannot argue the importance, because a leader's role, it's inherent that we lead people. So these interpersonal interactions and transactions are inevitable. That's what defines the role of a leader, really. But what these programs do not address, and this is where the gap lies, is how to make those learned strategies, learned behavioral strategies, sustainable. So here's a quick question for you just to reflect on, because obviously I can't see any of you, I can't ask you to interact with me. But have you ever said yes when you wanted to say no? Or have you ever carried out a task that you couldn't fully understand why or how? Or have you ever actually said no when you wanted to say yes? For now, just answer those questions to yourself. I will come back to them, and hopefully I'll be able to bring the whole circle around to show you why I asked those questions. So in my opinion, and I would strongly argue, that the foundation of sustainable leadership is understanding, at least the basic understanding, on how we as humans work. Because if we do something that we have been taught and told without giving the understanding on how something works or why something needs done, our behavior cannot be sustained, because we feel differently. And those feelings might be accompanied by, if it's in relation to a task you have to carry out, those feelings might be, oh, this is BS. Why do I have to do that? I don't understand. If it's in relation to any interpersonal interaction, those feelings could express themselves in similar such thoughts as, oh, why are they being so stupid? Or, oh, they only doing this to wrong me. If, say, someone did something differently to how you instructed them. So if we apply a learned strategy without really being able to appreciate why and how we as humans, as individuals, work, it will not be sustainable. Whilst that behavior might be sustained, but it will be more akin to obeying out of fear. And it will ultimately lead to physical and mental health deterioration and burnout. And I'd like to actually bring you back to those questions that I asked about having to sometimes do something when you would like to do differently, or when you don't understand why you should be doing something in one way or another. What does it feel like? Do we suppress the negative emotions that these situations give rise to? Do we then eventually forget about them And then we encounter a similar situation again, where we apply a strategy without fully understanding or being able to accept, because understanding is also necessary for our ability to accept, even if we cannot relate to something. So another situation comes along. Again, those negative feelings arising from a misalignment of our feelings and actions. They arise, we suppress them again, they start accumulating, and eventually that will lead to all sorts of harmful consequences, both to the individual and to the organization. And not to mention the ripple effect of the leaders whose actions and whose way of showing up really trickles down, unlike economy. So my argument is that we really need to redefine and rethink on how we develop leadership and people in leadership positions. Because application of taught strategies without understanding why and how is unsustainable, both for the individual in question, for the people they lead and manage, and for the organization. Application is not sufficient to sustain or to healthily sustain the behaviors. So we really need to turn and develop, first and foremost, as a foundation for everything else, the self-leadership skills, such as help people understand how they can reframe the situations that they encounter daily, but not only give tools, but explain how it works. Because it's psychology 101, really, that without understanding, we are very, very unlikely to sustain the effort in developing those new strategies and skills. So reframing the situation to first help yourself before you can help another. Another factor is to really have a basic understanding, which is accessible to absolutely all, of how our perception works, our individual perception based on our previous experiences. And whilst we might not be able to relate to someone with whom we interact in, because we didn't have experiences like they do, but if we have the basic understanding on how it works, we are a lot more likely to be able to accept those differences without the negative feelings and thoughts arising in us. Hence, again, making those behaviors more sustainable and naturally more authentic, because that's where the sustainability will come from. And another factor, which I think is very important for the leader's own or manager's own well-being, is the ability to spot the negative emotions arising in the body. Because if we only rely upon the cognitive knowledge and strategies, whilst still experiencing the symptoms of stress, and while the symptoms of stress manifest in the body, such as tension, ultimately developing into permanent long-term tension, that really leads to really poor health outcomes and burnout, mental health issues, which again cost the individual, cost the society, and cost the organization in question. So I really invite everyone listening, watching, to rethink how they develop their own leadership, the managers and leaders within the organization, and, well, ultimately, our own self-leadership skills, self-awareness, resilience, and other things that self-leadership homes within itself. So that's my little bit on leadership today. I will be going in future videos in a lot more detail about different aspects, but I just really called to do this quick video, and I was spurred on by the research of the cost to the organizations. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being interested in potentially more optimal ways of developing leadership and leaders. See you soon.